If I asked you what you think separates the people who transform their physique, their strength, their lives from everyone else, you'd probably say something like discipline, motivation, willpower. But you'd all be big fat wrong. Because I'd bet my nan's cat that absolutely none of them would find themselves in this state of constant motivation. They don't wake up every morning excited to train. They don't always feel like eating the healthy meal. They don't always enjoy early mornings, but they do have the right standards for themselves. And once you understand the difference between goals and standards, you'll realize why it is that some people go through this huge transformation and become completely unrecognizable, and others spend years trying and never getting anywhere. This is episode 6 of the Becoming Unrecognizable series. And if this is the first video you're watching, I'd recommend going back to episode 1, because I've spent the last 5 videos helping you build your future life brick by brick. You've visualized her. You've learned how she eats, how she sets goals, how she trains, how she makes decisions. There's one final piece that determines whether any of that actually lasts. Today I'm going to talk you through the kind of standards that every person living your dream life lives by, whether they realize it or not. Because becoming unrecognizable isn't about doing extraordinary things. It's about refusing to let your standards drop below the level of the person you're trying to become. But before I get into it, make sure that you've subscribed and give this video a like. You've got 5 standards. Standard number 1, I do what I said I was going to do. Even when it's not convenient, even when you have the motivation of a person nursing a 3-day hangover, because every time you tell yourself you're going to the gym and then don't, you don't just miss a workout, you're damaging your own levels of self-trust. And self-trust is so fucking hard to build, but it's even harder to rebuild once you've lost it. The second standard, I don't negotiate with myself. The moment your alarm goes off, the negotiations begin. I'll go tomorrow. I deserve a rest. I've worked really hard. Maybe I should just give myself the day off. But as soon as the argument starts, you've already lost. All you need to do in this scenario is just stop starting the conversation, because the decision's already been made. Your past self made it for you by setting that alarm. So all you need to do is follow through on her decision. The third standard, I don't let one bad choice become one bad day. And this is where most people fail, because they'll start with strong intentions on a Monday morning, only to miss their evening workout because work overran, and subsequently skip the rest of the week as a result. They'll be invited out for lunch with colleagues, they'll go off plan for one meal, and they'll think, right, well, I'll fuck that, let's try again on Monday. Present you isn't perfect, but future you isn't perfect either. Future you doesn't need perfection from present you. She needs consistency and she needs resilience. One bad decision doesn't change anything, but 200 good decisions, that's transformative. The fourth standard, I choose long-term pride over short-term comfort. Comfort is always available, which is why you probably feel like you are always fighting this huge battle against convenience. It's more convenient to stop off at KFC on your way home from work than it is to cook a meal from scratch. It's more convenient to roll over and turn your alarm on snooze than it is to get up and go out for a run. But you've been surfing off convenience for your entire life, and look where that's led you. Every meaningful transformation requires you to make a slightly harder decision today, because it's always going to have the better outcome tomorrow. Which brings us to standard number 5. My standards don't change depending on how I feel, because your feelings will change every moment of every day. But your standards, those pesky little fuckers need to stay exactly where they are if you want to have success. And hopefully you've already picked up on the fact that these aren't just standards that you can relate to what you're doing in the gym and the kitchen. These are standards that you can and should implement across your whole life if you want them to create the outcome that you're after. You need to turn into somebody who keeps the promises they make to themselves, who says, fuck the mood, follow the plan multiple times a day. And if you've watched every episode in this series, which I hope you have, by the way, you'll have picked up on something. None of these videos have solely been about fitness. They've been about changing your identity from multiple different perspectives. Because if you think about where we started back in episode 1, I asked you to visualize your future self. Not because visualization is magic necessarily, although it definitely fucking helps, but because you needed a target to set your sights on. And then I asked, how does she eat? How does she train? How does she make choices? But every single one of those questions leads back to the same place. What standards does she refuse to compromise on? Because that's the big fat difference here. You don't suddenly get fitter just because you've woken up one day with buckets of motivation. You don't become unrecognizable just because you crossed your fingers really hard and said a little prayer. You set higher standards of yourself than the version of you who watched episode 1. And every decision you make reinforces those standards. That is what an identity shift looks like, and that is what's required to becoming unrecognizable. You might have clicked on the first video in this series hoping for some motivation. But that's going to lead you butt fuck nowhere. Stop waiting for Monday, stop waiting for motivation to crawl out of your ass and present itself to you on a silver platter. Write those 5 standards down. I do what I said I was going to do. I don't negotiate with myself. I don't let one bad choice become one bad day. I choose long-term pride over short-term comfort. My standards don't change depending on how I feel. Write them down, read them every goddamn morning. Then spend the next 90 days proving to yourself that they are true by putting them into practice every single day, because confidence isn't something that you can just think your way into. Becoming unrecognizable isn't just something you can visualize. It all comes from having the evidence. It's that cumulative effect of the promises that you've kept. And after 90 days of doing exactly that, of living by the standards that you've set yourself, you won't need to convince yourself that you are becoming someone different. You'll have the receipts and you'll be well on your way to becoming them.